Hi everybody, and how are you? Welcome to Storytime with Jev, or Jev Reads, or whatever it is that we want to call it. I think I've got everything working at the moment. We'll see how we go. If I suddenly disappear, that's just one of those things. So here we go. Now, I am reading for you another part of the story of the Treasure Seekers by Nesbit, which I was able to download from Project Gutenberg. The website is Gutenberg, Gutenberg.org, and there's public domain books there, which you are obviously most welcome to download and read for yourself. But yes, that's a great place for getting old stories from. So I'm going to carry on now. We are reading The Story of the Treasure Seekers by Nesbit, and we are reading Chapter 7, Being Bandits. So we'll see what's up. Noel was quite tiresome for ever so long after we found the princess. He would keep on wanting to go to the park when the rest of us didn't, and though we went several times to please him, we never found that door open again, and all of us knew him from the first. All of us, except him, knew from the first that it would be no go. So now we thought it was time to do something to rouse him from the stupor of despair, which is always done to heroes when anything baffling has occurred. Besides, we were getting very short of money again. The fortunes of your house cannot be restored, not so that they will last, that is, even by the £1.8 we got when we had the good hunting. We spent a good deal of that on presents for Father's birthday. We got him a paperweight, like a glass bun, with a picture of Lewisham Church at the bottom, and a blotting pad, and a box of preserved fruits, and an ivory pen holder with a view of Greenwich Park in the little hole where you look through at the top. He was most awfully pleased and surprised, and when he heard how Noel and Oswald had earned the money to buy the things, he was more surprised still. Nearly all the rest of our money went to get fireworks for the 5th of November. We got 6 Catherine wheels and 4 rockets, 2 hand lights, 1 red and 1 green, a 6-penny maroon, 2 Roman candles, they cost £1, some Italian streamers, a fairy fountain, and a tourbillon that cost 18 pence and was very nearly worth it. But I think crackers and squibs are a mistake. It's true you get a lot of them for the money, and they are not bad fun for the first 2 or 3 dozen, but you get jolly sick of them before you've let off your 6 penn'orth. And the only amusing way is not allowed. It is putting them in the fire. It always seems such a long time till the evening when you've got fireworks in the house, and I think it was rather a foggy day. And I think, as it was a rather foggy day, we should have decided to let them off directly after breakfast. Only Father had said he would help us to let them off at 8 o'clock after he had had his dinner, and you ought never to disappoint your father if you can help it. You see, we had 3 good reasons for trying H.O.'s idea of restoring the fallen fortunes of our house by becoming bandits on the 5th of November. We had a 4th reason as well, and that was the best reason of the lot. You remember Dora thought it would be wrong to be bandits, and the 5th of November came while Dora was away at Stroud, staying with her godmother. Stroud is in Gloucestershire. We were determined to do it while she was out of the way because we did not think it wrong, and besides, we meant to do it anyhow. We held a council, of course, and laid our plans very carefully. We let H.O. be captain because it was his idea. Oswald was lieutenant, or lieutenant. Oswald was quite fair because he let H.O. call himself captain, but Oswald is the eldest next to Dora after all. Our plan was this. We were all to go up onto the heath. Our house is in the Lewisham Road, but it's quite close to the heath if you cut up the short way opposite the confectioner's, past the nursery gardens and the cottage hospital, and turn to the left again and afterwards to the right. Sounds a bit complicated to me. You come out then at the top of the hill where the big guns are, with the iron fence around them, and where the bands play on Thursday evenings in the summer. So it's probably a war memorial and band rotunda. We were to lurk in ambush there and waylay any unwary traveller unwary, not unweary. We would call upon him to surrender his arms and then bring him home and put him in the deepest dungeon below the castle moat, and then we were to load him with chains and send to his friends for ransom. You may think we had no chains, but you are wrong, because we used to keep 2 other dogs once, besides Pincher, before the fall of the fortunes of the ancient house of Bastable, and they were quite big dogs. It was latish in the afternoon before we started. We thought we could lurk better if it was nearly dark. It was rather foggy, and we waited a good while beside the railings, but all the belated travellers were either grown up or else they were board school children. We weren't going to get into a row with grown-up people, especially strangers, and no true bandit would ever stoop to ask a ransom from the relations of the poor and needy, so we thought it better to wait. And as I said, it was Guy Fawkes Day. If it had not been, we should never have been able to be bandits at all, for the unwary traveller we did catch had been forbidden to go out because he had a cold in his head, but he would run out to follow a guy, that's a guy used for Guy Fawkes, without even putting on a coat or a comforter, and it was a very damp, foggy afternoon and nearly dark, so you could see it was his own fault entirely, and served him jolly well right. We saw him coming up over the heath, just as we were deciding to go home to tea. He had followed that guy right across to the village. We call Blackheath the village, I don't know why. And he was coming back dragging his feet and sniffing. "Hist! An unwary traveller approaches," whispered Oswald. "Muffle your horses' heads and see to the priming of your pistols," muttered Alice. She always will play boys' parts, and she makes Ellis cut her hair short on purpose. Ellis is a very obliging hairdresser. "Steal softly upon him," said Noel, "for lo, 'tis dusk, and no human eyes can mark our deeds." So we ran out and surrounded the unwary traveller. It turned out to be Albert next door, and he was very frightened indeed until he saw who we were. "Surrender," hissed Oswald in a desperate-sounding voice as he caught the arm of the unwary. And Albert next door said, "All right, I'm surrendering as hard as I can. You needn't pull my arm off." We explained to him that resistance was useless, and I think he saw that from the first. We held him tight by both arms, and we marched him home down the hill into a hollow square of 5. He wanted to tell us about the guy, but we made him see that it was not proper for prisoners to talk to the guard, especially about guys that the prisoner had been told not to go after because of his cold. When we got to where we live, he said, "All right, I don't want to tell you. You'll wish I had afterwards. You never saw such a guy." "I can see you," said H.O. It was very rude, and Oswald told him so at once, because it is his duty as an elder brother. But H.O. is very young and does not know better yet, and besides, it wasn't bad for H.O. Albert next door said, "You haven't any manners, and I want to go into my tea. Let go of me." But Alice told him, quite kindly, that he was not going into his tea, but coming with us. "I'm not," said Albert next door. "I'm going home. Leave go. I've got a bad cold. You're making it worse." Then he tried to cough, which was very silly, because we'd seen him in the morning and he told us where the cold was that he wasn't to go out with. When he had tried to cough, he said, "Leave go of me. You see, my cold's getting worse." "You should have thought of that before," said Dicky. "You're coming in with us." "Don't be silly," said Noel. "You know we'd told you at the very beginning that resistance was useless. There's no disgrace in yielding. We are 5 to your 1. By this time, Eliza had opened the door, and we thought it best to take him in without any more parleying. To parley with a prisoner is not done by bandits. Directly we got him safe into the nursery, H.O. began to jump about and say, "Now you're a prisoner, really and truly." And Albert next door began to cry. He always does. I wonder he didn't begin long before. But Alice fetched him one of the dried fruits we gave father for his birthday. It was a green walnut. I have noticed the walnuts and the plums always get left till last in the box. The apricots go first. And then the figs and pears and the cherries, if there are any. So he ate it and shut up. Then we explained his position to him so that there should be no mistake, and he couldn't say afterwards that he had not understood. "There will be no violence," said Oswald. He was now captain of the bandits, because we all know H.O. likes to be chaplain when we play prisoners. "No violence, but you will be confined in a dark subterranean dungeon where toads and snakes crawl, and but little of the light of day filters through the heavily mullioned windows." That's the bars on the window. "You will be loaded with chains. Now don't begin again, baby. There's nothing to cry about. Straw will be your pallet." That's what you use as a mattress instead. Besides you, the jailer will set a ewer is only a jug, stupid, it won't eat you, a ewer with water, and a mouldering crust will be your food. But Albert next door never enters into the spirit of a thing. He mumbled something about tea time. Now Oswald, though stern, is always just, and besides we were all rather hungry, and tea was ready, so we had it at once. Albert next door and all, and we gave him what was left of the 4-pound jar of apricot jam we got with the money Noel got for his poetry, and we saved our crusts for the prisoner. Albert next door was very tiresome. Nobody could have had a nicer prison than he had. We fenced him into a corner with the old wire nursery fender and all the chairs, instead of putting him in the coal cellar as we had first intended. And when he said the dog chains were cold, the girls were kind enough to warm his fetters thoroughly at the fire before we put them on him. We got the straw cases of some bottles of wine someone sent father one Christmas. It is some years ago, but the cases are quite good. We unpacked them very carefully and pulled them to pieces and scattered the straw about. It made a lovely straw pallet, and took ever so long to make, but Albert next door has yet to learn what gratitude really is. We got the bread trencher for the wooden platter where the prisoners' crusts were put. They were not mouldy, but we could not wait till they got so. And for the ewer we got the toilet jug out of the spare room where nobody ever sleeps. A toilet jug is, in early days in New Zealand, you'd have a washstand, which is like a little desk thing, which had a jug, a wash jug and basin. So toilet jug being for toileting, as in doing your toiletries, which is washing your face and things like that. So that's what that one is, I think. I'm pretty sure it is. And so for the ewer we got the toilet jug out of the spare room where nobody ever sleeps. And even then Albert next door couldn't be happy like the rest of us. He howled and cried and tried to get out, and he knocked the ewer over and stamped on the mouldering crusts. Luckily there was no water in the ewer because we'd forgotten it, only dust and spiders. So we tied him up with the clothesline from the back kitchen, and we had to hurry up, which was a pity for him. We might have had him rescued by a devoted page if he hadn't been so tiresome. In fact, Noel was actually dressing up for the page when Albert next door kicked over the prison ewer. We got a sheet of paper out of an old exercise book, and I made H.O. prick his own thumb because he is our little brother and it is our duty to teach him to be brave. None of us mind pricking ourselves. We've done it heaps of times. H.O. didn't like it, but he agreed to do it, and I helped him a little because he was going so slow, and when he saw the red bead of blood getting fatter and bigger as I squeezed his thumb, he was very pleased, just as I had told him he would be. This is what we wrote with H.O.'s blood, only the blood gave out when we got to restored, and we had to write the rest with Crimson Lake, which is not the same colour, though I always use it myself for painting wounds. Crimson Lake is a watercolour, the colour of a particular type of paint used for watercolour painting. It's a common name of one of the reds. While Oswald was writing it, he heard Alice whispering to the prisoner that it would soon be over and it was only play. The prisoner left off howling, so I pretended not to hear what she said. A bandit captain has to overlook things sometimes. This was the letter. Albert Morrison is held a prisoner by bandits. On payment of £300 he will be restored to his sorrowing relatives, and all will be forgotten and forgiven. I was not sure about the last part, but Dickie was certain he had seen it in the paper, so I suppose it must have been all right. We let H.O. take the letter. It was only fair, as it was his blood it was written with, and told him to leave it next door for Mrs. Morrison. H.O. came back quite quickly, and Albert next door's uncle came with him. "What's all this about, Albert?" he cried. "Alas, alas, my nephew, do I find you the prisoner of a desperate band of brigands?" "Bandits," said H.O. "You know it says bandits." "I beg your pardon, gentlemen," said Albert next door's uncle. "Bandits it is, of course. This, Albert, is the direct result of the pursuit of the guy on an occasion when your doting mother had expressly warned you to forego the pleasures of the chase." Albert said it wasn't his fault and he hadn't wanted to play. "So ho," said his uncle. "Impenitent too." That means he was not regretful of it. "Where's the dungeon?" We explained the dungeon and showed him the straw pallet and the ewer and the mouldering crusts and other things. "Very pretty and complete," he said. "Albert, you are more highly privileged than ever I was. No one ever made me a nice dungeon when I was your age. I think I had better leave you where you are." Albert began to cry again and said he was sorry and he would be a good boy. "And on this old familiar basis you expect me to ransom you, do you? Honestly, my nephew, I doubt whether you are worth it. Besides, the sum mentioned in this document strikes me as excessive. Albert really is not worth £3,000. Also, by a strange and unfortunate chance, I haven't the money about me. Couldn't you take less?" I thought it actually said 300. No, it said 3,000, sorry. We said perhaps we could. "Say 8p," suggested Albert next door's uncle, "which is all the small change I happen to have on my person." "Thank you very much," said Alice as he held it out. "But are you sure you can spare it? Because really, it's only play." "Quite sure. Now, Albert, the game is over. You had better run home to your mother and tell her how much you've enjoyed yourself." When Albert next door had gone, his uncle sat in the Guy Fawkes armchair and took Alice on his knee, and we sat around the fire waiting till it would be time to let off our fireworks. We roasted the chestnuts he sent Dickie out for, and he told us stories till it was nearly 7. His stories are first-rate. He does all the parts in different voices. At last he said, "Look here, young'uns, I like to see you play and enjoy yourselves, and I don't think it hurts Albert to enjoy himself too." "I don't think he did much," said H.O., but I knew what Albert next door's uncle meant, because I'm much older than H.O. He went on, "But what about Albert's mother? Didn't you think how anxious she would be at his not coming home? As it happens, I saw him come in with you, so we knew it was all right. But if I hadn't, eh?" He only talks like that when he is very serious or even angry. Other times he talks like people in books. To us, I mean. We none of us said anything, but I was thinking. Then Alice spoke. Girls seem not to mind saying things that we don't say. She put her arms round Albert next door's uncle's neck and said, "We're very, very sorry. We didn't think about his mother. You see, we tried very hard not to think about other people's mothers because..." Just then we heard Father's door key, and Albert next door's uncle kissed Alice and put her down, and we all went down to meet Father. As we went, I thought I heard Albert next door's uncle say something that sounded like, "Poor little beggars." He couldn't have meant us when we'd been having such a jolly time, and chestnuts and fireworks to look forward to after dinner, and everything. So that's the end of the chapter. Hi, roosters! Hi, son of Jev! Welcome, welcome! Good to see you here. Good to have you here, indeed. Now, chapter break means water break, or whatever it is that you're drinking. So, for anyone who's new here, who may not have said anything in the chat, which is fine because I welcome people to lurk, when you come here to listen to a story, make sure you've got something to drink, and if you like it, something to snack on, and somewhere comfortable to sit or lie down and listen. It's really good to have you all here, so I'm glad you can make it. And how's your weekend been? Here in New Zealand, we have finished the weekend and it's now Monday. I know that some people are not yet at the end of the weekend. Yes, I know you ate instant noodles. I was listening to the packet and the kettle. But I've already had lunch, so that's why I wasn't getting hungry for them. Yeah, are we going to be in detention for longer? I hope they don't make us do lines. Yeah, in the microwave. And Son of Jev will have no idea what I'm talking about unless he's figured it out from somewhere else, because he hasn't had that experience. Maybe that's what we should do with the people who break detention. They should have to do lines. That would be funny. Anyway, I'm going to read the next... Sorry. My nose is itchy. I'm going to read the next chapter. True, you haven't, but I have. Roosters might have as well. I don't know. I don't know what his schooling experience was. Oh, sorry. I've got the itchies now. And look, I remember my little tiara. I forgot it on Friday because it was underneath something on my desk. If I'd had it on top, then I would have remembered because I would have seen it. Oh, sorry. That's a bit better. Now, we shall carry on. We are going to carry on reading The Story of the Treasure Seekers by Edith Nesbit. Now, I'm actually just going to look for what the subtitle is of the story, because it just explains what the story is a little bit longer. Being The Story of the Treasure Seekers, being the adventures of the Bastable children in search of a fortune. Because apparently their family is not doing too well financially. Probably something to do with what was going on at the time. Hi, Jonathan. How you doing? Good to see you here. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to carry on reading. So I'm reading the next chapter of... Yeah, I know, I've got itchy nose. That's just one of the things I do. The Story of the Treasure Seekers by E. Nesbit, and I'm going to read chapter 8. And I won't be talking during the chapter to you guys, except for maybe to explain something weird in the text that I think some listeners, not necessarily you guys, might not understand. So, chapter 8, Being Editors. Being editors. It was Albert's uncle who thought of our trying a newspaper. He said he thought we should not find the bandit business a paying industry as a permanency, and that journalism might be. We had sold Noel's poetry and that piece of information about Lord Tottenham to the good editor, so we thought it would not be a bad idea to have a newspaper of our own. We saw plainly that editors must be very rich and powerful because of the grand office and the man in the glass case like a museum, and the soft carpets and the big writing table. The man in the glass case was the man who was at the entrance that told them whether or not they could actually go up and see the editor, the one who took the message and sent it up to the editor to find out if they could see him. That was in the previous day's reading. Besides our having seen a whole handful of money that the editor pulled out quite carelessly from his trousers pocket when he gave me my 5 bob. Dora wanted to be editor. Obviously Dora's home again in this chapter. Probably pine pollen. Dora wanted to be editor, and so did Oswald, but he gave way to her because she is a girl, and afterwards he knew that it is true what it says in copybooks about virtue being its own reward. Oh dear. Because you've no idea what a bother it is. Everybody wanted to put in everything just as they liked, no matter how much room there was on the page. It was simply awful. Dora put up with it as long as she could, and then she said if she wasn't let alone, she wouldn't go on being editor. They could be the paper's editors themselves, so there. Then Oswald said, like a good brother, I will help you if you like, Dora. And she said, you're more trouble than all the rest of them. Come and be editor and see how you like it. I give it up to you. But she didn't, and we did it together. We let Albert next door be sub-editor because he had hurt his foot with a nail in his boot. That gathered. I'm not sure what that gathered meant. Maybe the original, because these have been written down from people reading the book and typing the words to digitize it rather than just scanning it. They scan it and then they have someone read through and correct, and things don't always get scanned correctly. So it may be that his boot had gathered a nail, like when he was walking around in the yard. When it was done, Albert next door's uncle had it copied for us in typewriting, and we sent copies to all our friends, and then of course there was no one left that we could ask to buy it. We did not think of that until too late. We called the paper the Lewisham Recorder. Lewisham because we live there, and Recorder in memory of the good editor, because that one was called the Recorder, some sort of... It just seems to be a common newspaper name. I think I might have cat hair up my nose. It keeps tickling and itching. I could write a better paper in my head, but an editor is not allowed to write all the paper. It's very hard, but he is not. You just have to fill it up with what you can get from other writers. If ever I have time, I will write a paper all by myself. It won't be patchy. We had no time to make it an illustrated paper, but I drew the ship going down with all hands for the first copy. But the typewriter can't draw ships, so it was left out in the other copies. The time the first paper took to write, no one would believe. This was the newspaper. The Lewisham Recorder. That's the title. Editors, Dora and Oswald Bastable. Editorial note. Every paper is written for some reason. Ours is because we want to sell it and get money. If what we have written brings happiness to any sad heart, we should not have laboured in vain. But we want the money too. Many papers are content with the sad heart and the happiness, but we are not like that, and it is best not to be deceitful. By the editors. There will be 2 serial stories, one by Dickie and one by all of us. In a serial story you only put in 1 chapter at a time, but we shall put all our serial story at once, if Dora has time to copy it. Dickie's will come later on. Serial story by us all. Serial because the sections are published, often the chapters. Each chapter is published in the next copy of the paper. Chapter 1 by Dora. The sun was setting behind a romantic-looking tower when 2 strangers might have been observed descending the crest of the hill. The eldest a man in the prime of life, the other a handsome youth who reminded everybody of Quentin Durward. They approached the castle in which the fair lady Alicia awaited her deliverers. She leaned from the castellated window and waved her lily hand as they approached. They returned her signal and retired to seek rest and refreshment at a neighbouring hostelry. Chapter 2 by Alice. The princess was very uncomfortable in the tower because her fairy godmother had told her all sorts of horrid things would happen if she didn't catch a mouse every day, and she had caught so many mice that now there were hardly any left to catch. So she sent her carrier pigeon to ask the noble strangers if they could send her a few mice, because she would be of age in a few days and then it wouldn't matter. So the fairy godmother, I'm very sorry, but there's no room to make the chapters any longer. That's a note by the editor. Chapter 3 by the sub-editor. In brackets, I can't. I'd much rather not. I don't know how. End of brackets. Chapter 4 by Dickie. I must now retrace my steps and tell you something about our hero. You must know he had been to an awfully jolly school where they had turkey and goose every day for dinner and never any mutton, and as many helps of pudding as a fellow cared to send his plate for. So of course they had all grown up very strong, and before he left school he challenged the head to have it out man to man, and he gave it him. I tell you, that was the education that made him able to fight Red Indians and to be the stranger who might have been observed in the first chapter. Chapter 5 by Noel. I think it's time something happened in this story. So then the dragon, he came out, blowing fire out of his nose, and he said, "Come on, you valiant man and true. I'd like to have a set to along of you." That's bad English, Ed. I don't care, it's what the dragon said. Who told you dragons didn't talk bad English? Noel. So the hero, whose name was Neurius, replied, "My blade is sharp, my axe is keen. You're not nearly as big as a good many dragons I've seen." Don't put in so much poetry, Noel. It's not fair, because none of the others can do it, Ed. That's a note from the editor. And then they went at it, and he beat the dragon, just as he did the head in Dickie's part of the story. And so he married the princess, and they lived... No, they didn't, not till the last chapter, Ed. Chapter 6 by H.O. I think it's a very nice story, but what about the mice? I don't want to say any more. Dora can have what's left of my chapter. Chapter 7 by the editors. So when the dragon was dead, there were lots of mice because he used to kill them for his tea, but now they rapidly multiplied and ravaged the country, so the fair lady Alicia, sometimes called the princess, had to say she would not marry anyone unless they could rid the country of this plague of mice. Then the prince, whose real name didn't begin with N, but was Osrawaldo, waved his magic sword, and the dragon stood before them, bowing gracefully. They made him promise to be good, and then they forgave him. And when the wedding breakfast came, all the bones were saved for him. And so they were married and lived happily ever after. What became of the other stranger? Note from Noel. The dragon ate him because he asked too many questions. Note from the editor. This is the end of the story. Very definitely written by a bunch of different people for each chapter. In the next section in their newspaper. Instructive. It only takes 4 hours and a quarter now to get from London to Manchester, but I should not think anyone would if they could help it. A dreadful warning. A wicked boy told me a very instructive thing about ginger. They had opened one of the large jars, and he happened to take out quite a lot, and he made it all right by dropping marbles in, making the level of it enough, till there was as much ginger as before. But he told me that on the Sunday, when it was coming near the part where there is only juice generally, I had no idea what his feelings were. I don't see what he could have said when they asked him. I should be sorry to act like it. So someone's owning up to having pinched the ginger out of the crystallized ginger, the ginger in liquid jar as a snack. Scientific. Experiments should always be made out of doors. And don't use benzoline, Dickie. That was when he burnt his eyebrows off, Ed. The earth is 2,400 miles around and 800 through. At least I think so, but perhaps it's the other way. Note from Dickie. You ought to have been sure before you began. Note from the editor. Scientific column. In this so-called 19th century, science is but too little considered in the nurseries of the rich and proud. But we are not like that. It is not generally known that if you put bits of camphor in lukewarm water, it will move about. If you drop sweet oil in, the camphor will dart away and then stop moving. Sweet oil is like almond oil. But don't drop any till you are tired of it, because the camphor won't move anymore. Much amusement and instruction is lost by not knowing things like this. If you put a sixpence under a shilling in a wine glass and blow hard down the side of the glass, the sixpence will jump up and sit on the top of the shilling. At least, I can't do it myself, but my cousin can. He is in the Navy. Answers to correspondence. Noel, you are very poetical, but I am sorry to say it will not do. Alice, nothing will ever make your hair curl, so it is no use. Some people say it's more important to tidy up as you go along. I don't mean you in particular, but everyone. H.O. We never said you were tubby, but the editor does not know any cure. This is like the agony aunt section. Answers. Noel, if there is any of the paper over when this newspaper is finished, I will exchange it for you for your shut-up inkstand or the knife that has the useful thing in it for taking stones out of horses' feet, but you can't have it without. In other words, you can't have the extra paper unless you give me one of those things. H.O. There are many ways how your steam engine might stop working. You might ask Dickie. He knows one of them. I think it is the way yours stopped. Do you think Dickie might have sabotaged it? Noel, if you think that by filling the garden with sand you can make crabs build their nests there, you are not at all sensible. You have altered your poem about the Battle of Waterloo so often that we cannot read it except where the Duke waves his sword and says something we can't read either. Why did you write it on blotting paper with purple chalk? Ed. Because you know who sneaked my pencil, which is a note from Noel. Poetry. The Assyrian came down like a wolf on the fold, and the way he came down was awful, I'm told, but it's nothing to the way one of the editors comes down on me if I crumble my bread and butter or spill my tea. That one's by Noel, because he's the one who writes poetry. Curious facts. If you hold a guinea pig up by his tail, his eyes drop out. I didn't know guinea pigs had tails. You can't do half the things yourself that children in books do, making models or soon. I wonder why, said Alice. And that one's an observation from Alice. If you take a date stone out and put in an almond and eat them together, it is prime. I found this out. That's a note from the sub-editor. And a note from your reader is that you can buy dates without stones in them and put almonds in them. And that's also quite yummy. And if you're not a vegetarian, you can wrap bacon around them and then grill them. Bacon rashers, streaky bacon rashers. And grill them till the bacon's crispy and eat them that way. And that's extra yummy. Anyway, sorry, I'll carry on with the actual story rather than giving you recipes. If you put your wet hand into boiling lead, it will not hurt you if you draw it out quickly enough. I have never tried this. Dora. Don't ever try this. This is your reader's note. For health and safety reasons, don't ever try this. Water into lead will make the lead spit. I have seen people casting diving weights that ended up with a little bit of water in sand that they were casting into, and the lead was spitting everywhere. And it was an adult, and they nearly very badly burnt themselves, because the problem with lead when it's runny, because it's been melted, is that it sticks when it hits your skin and it keeps burning, and you get this lump of very hot lead on your skin, burning deeper and deeper. So just ignore what she said. But she did say she's never tried it. It's just something she's heard. The purring class. Instructive article. If I ever keep a school, everything shall be quite different. Nobody shall learn anything they don't want to, and sometimes instead of having masters and mistresses, we will have cats, and we will dress up in cat skins and learn purring. Now, my dears, the old cat will say, 1, 2, 3, all purr together. And we shall purr like anything. She won't teach us to mew, but we shall know how without teaching. Children do know some things without being taught. And that one's by Alice. Sorry, I'm just reaching for my charge cable for my iPad. Poetry, translated into French by Dora. Quand j'étais jeune et j'étais fou. No, I'm not even going to try reading the rest of that, because I have no idea, because I haven't learned French. Sorry about that. And that's your reader telling you. That's not what's written in there. There's 4 lines. Oh, come on. Go the right way around. There are 4 lines written in French, and it's probably very badly written French. Another piece of it. And then there's another 4 lines, and I'm not going to read that for you. And I have no idea what it means, because I never learnt French. And a lot of people in this part of the world don't learn French anymore. Recreations. It is a mistake to think that cats are playful. I often try to get a cat to play with me, and she never seems to care about the game, no matter how little it hurts. And that's a note from H.O. Making pots and pans with clay is fun, but do not tell the grown-ups. It is better to surprise them, and then you must say at once how easily it washes off. Much easier than ink. And that's a note from Dickie. A lot of experience in these observations. Sam Redfern, or The Bushranger's Burial, by Dickie. Well, Annie, I have bad news for you, said Mr. Ridgway as he entered the comfortable dining room of his cabin in the bush. That's the name of the boat, I think. Sam Redfern, the bushranger, is about this part of the bush just now. I hope he will not attack us with his gang. Oh, cabin in the bush, right. I hope not, responded Annie, a gentle maiden of some 16 summers. Just then a knock came came a knock at the door of the hut, and a gruff voice asked them to open the door. "It is Sam Redfern, the bushranger, father," said the girl. "The same," responded the voice, and the next moment the hall door was smashed in, and Sam Redfern sprang in, followed by his gang. Chapter 2. Annie's father was at once overpowered, and Annie herself lay bound with cords on the drawing-room sofa. Sam Redfern set a guard round the lonely hut, and all human aid was despaired of. But you never know. Far away in the bush, a different scene was being enacted. "Must be Injuns," said a tall man to himself as he pushed his way through the brushwood. It was Jim Carlton, the celebrated detective. "I know them," he added. "They are Apaches." Just then 10 Indians in full war paint appeared. Carlton raised his rifle and fired, and slinging their scalps on his arm, he hastened towards the humble log hut where resided his affianced bride, Annie Ridgway, sometimes known as the Flower of the Bush. Chapter 3. The moon was low on the horizon, and Sam Redfern was seated at a drinking bout with some of his boon companions. They had rifled the cellars of the hut, and the rich wines flowed like water in the golden goblets of Mr. Ridgway. But Annie had made friends with one of the gang, a noble, good-hearted man who had joined Sam Redfern by mistake. And she had told him to go and get the police as quickly as possible. "Ha ha!" cried Redfern. "Now I am enjoying myself." He little knew that his doom was near upon him. Just then Annie gave a piercing scream, and Sam Redfern got up, seizing his revolver. Ah! Those old Western soaps. Sam Redfern got up, seizing his revolver. "Who are you?" he cried as a man entered. "I am Jim Carlton, the celebrated detective," said the new arrival. Sam Redfern's revolver dropped from his nerveless fingers. But the next moment he had sprung upon the detective with the well-known activity of a mountain sheep. That's a bit weird. And Annie shrieked, for she had grown to love the rough bushranger. To be continued at the end of the paper, if there is room. I'm glad you know some French, roosters. I'm not even going to attempt it. I have no idea what I was reading. Scholastic. That means to do with school. "A new slate is horrid till it is washed in milk. I like the green spots on them to draw patterns round. I know a good way to make a slate pencil squeak, but I won't put it in because I don't want to make it common." These are all notes from the sub-editor. I don't know about any of his suggestions. "Peppermint is a great help with arithmetic. The boy who was second in the Oxford local always did it. He gave me 2 peppermint lollies. The examiner said to him, 'Are you eating peppermints?' And he said, 'No, sir.' He told me afterwards it was quite true because he was only sucking one. I'm glad I wasn't asked. I should never have thought of that, and I would have had to say yes." And that's a note from Oswald. "The Wreck of the Malabar" by Noel, author of A Dream of Ancient Ancestors. He isn't really, but he put it in to make it seem more real. "Hark, what is that noise of rolling waves and thunder in the air? 'Tis the death knell of the sailors and officers and passengers of the good ship Malabar. It was a fair and lovely noon when the good ship put out of port, and people said, 'Ah, little we think how soon she will be the element's sport.' She was indeed a lovely sight upon the billows with sails spread, but the captain folded his gloomy arms. Ah, if she had been a lifeboat instead. See, the captain, stern yet gloomy, flings his son upon a rock, hoping that there his darling boy may escape the wreck." I think Noel's sense of rhyme is not very good. "Alas, in vain the loud winds roared, and nobody was saved. That was the wreck of the Malabar. Then let us toll for the brave." That's by Noel. Gardening notes. "It is useless to plant cherry stones in the hope of eating the fruit, because they don't. Alice won't lend her gardening tools again because the last time Noel left them out in the rain, and I don't like it. He said he didn't." I think that's a note from Alice. Seeds and bulbs. "These are useful to play at shop with until you are ready. Not at dinner parties, for they will not grow unless uncooked. Potatoes are not grown with seed, but with chopped up potatoes." Yes, because they sprout from the eyes. And when she says chopped up, she means cut so you have an eye on one piece of the potato and an eye on the other piece of the potato, so you get 2 pieces of potato to plant. That's what she means by chop, not chop, 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 chop. Hold on to your dream. Oh, that sounds cool. I like that. I might need to write that down. But I can't write it down at the moment, sorry. And I won't try saying it. Potatoes are not grown with seed, but with chopped up potatoes. Apple trees are grown from twigs, which is less wasteful. Twigs, that's called taking cuttings. And if you get the right sort in at the right time of year, you take a piece of the wood from the apple tree, the twig of the apple tree, as long as it's not flowering or fruiting. It needs to be when it's at the stage of having leaves and not other things going on, because then it puts all its effort, its energy into growing roots. If it's doing flowers, then all the energy is going in the other direction. Oak trees come from acorns. Everyone knows this. When Noel says he could grow one from a peach stone wrapped up in oak leaves, he shows that he knows nothing about gardening but marigolds. And when I passed by his garden, I thought they seemed just like weeds now the flowers have been picked. That's the marigolds. A boy once dared me to eat a bulb. Not a good idea, because some bulbs are quite poisonous. Dogs are very industrious and fond of gardening. Pincher is always planting bones, but they never grow up. There couldn't be a bone tree. I think this is what makes him bark so unhappily at night. He has never tried planting dog biscuit, but he is fonder of bones, and perhaps he wants to be quite sure about them first. Sam Redfern or the Bushrangers' Burial by Dickey, Chapter 4 and last. This would have been a jolly good story if they had let me finish it at the beginning of the paper as I wanted to, but now I have forgotten how I meant it to end, and I have lost my book about Red Indians, and all my boys of England have been sneaked. That's a magazine or annual type book. The girls say good riddance, so I expect they did it. They want me to just put in which Annie married, which of the men. But I shan't, so they will never know. We have now put everything we can think of into the paper. It takes a lot of thinking about. I don't know how grown-ups manage to write all they do. It must make their heads ache, especially lesson books. Albert next door only wrote 1 chapter of the serial story, but he could have done some more if he had wanted to. He could not write out any of the things because he cannot spell. He says he can, but it takes him such a long time he might just as well not be able. There are 1 or 2 things more. I'm sick of it, but Dora says she will write them in. Legal answer wanted. A quantity of excellent string is offered if you know whether there really is a law passed about not buying gunpowder under 13. That's 13 years old. That's a note from Dickey. The price of this paper is 1 shilling each, and 6pence extra for the picture of the Malabar going down with all hands. If we sell 100 copies, we will write another paper. I think they're actually a little bit hopeful. And so we would have done, but we never did. Albert next door's uncle gave us 2 shillings, and that was all. You can't restore fallen fortunes with 2 shillings. I'm hoping that they gave him the picture of the Malabar going down with all hands. And I'm going to have a drink because that's the end of that chapter. Yes, and it's charging. I shall put this down. And you can talk again. Oh, you can talk anyway. I can talk again. Yes, pollen season. We noticed that the other day too. When we went grocery shopping, because we haven't done a lot of going out otherwise. And yes, there were 2 of us in the car to go grocery shopping, but only 1 person went into the shop. This is since lockdown started. I took Son of Jev as my support animal. Yeah, just made it a little bit easier. Yes, he did stay in the car the whole time. That's right. So there wasn't a risk to anyone else. Quick, run off, go to the loo before I start reading again. Yeah, apparently, I'm guessing because Son of Jev is here that's why my my Twitch window does not give me my my moderator's view, which it normally does. So, doesn't matter. Right, so I'm going to carry on reading because we've been going a little while now, but it's not yet 4 o'clock. What are you on about? Why are you saying what about? Normally when I'm streaming on Twitch, if I've got my browser open with Twitch in it, keeping an eye on what's going on, it gives me a moderator's view version of it, which this kind of is, but it doesn't have this, it doesn't visually look the same. Anyway, so I've got some troubleshooting to do, or find out if they've done an update to their system. I think that's what it is. So yeah, you know that icon that you have in front of your name, Son of Jev? That. There's usually a button down the bottom below the chat box that lets me open up a moderator's view version of the window. So, and it just gives me some additional options, like showing me a queue of anything that needs to be modded, like auto mod words and phrases. So anyway, yeah, I know you have that. I know. I'm talking about in browser for when I'm streaming. It usually gives me an extra option in the view. Anyway, so I'm going to carry on reading because you don't need to worry about all of that. That's just blah, 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 blah. So, roosters. How do you know that in French? Is that something that someone you like the sound of, or did you learn French? And I'll wait a few moments because what you guys hear is a little bit behind me talking. This is assuming you're still there. I like that. Accroche-toi à ton rêve. ELO. Okay, cool. Right, I'm going to carry on reading. The Story of the Treasure Seekers by E. Nesbit, Chapter 9, The GB. I have no idea what this one is. Right, being editors is not the best way to wealth. We all feel this now, and highwaymen are not respected anymore like they used to be. I'm sure we had tried our best to restore our fallen fortunes. We felt their fall very much because we knew the Bastables had been rich once. Dora and Oswald can remember when Father was always bringing nice things home from London, and there used to be turkeys and geese and wine and cigars come by the carrier at Christmas time, and boxes of candied fruit and French plums in ornamental boxes with silk and velvet and gilding on them. They were called prunes, but the prunes you buy at the grocer's are quite different. But now there is seldom anything nice brought from London, and the turkey and the prune people have forgotten Father's address. So Lewisham is, I think, now one of the suburbs of London, but at the time when this was written it was actually considered to be a separate area, like a village, but bigger than that, actually a town. And a lot of London and a lot of slightly older cities are like that, where you actually have the old original city centre, and then you've got the villages and towns that developed around it, which the main city grows out and joins them together. But there's still lots of little centres, but the little centres have become all part of the one big city. So that's just when they were talking about London. So how can we restore those beastly fallen fortunes, said Oswald. We've tried digging and writing and princesses and being editors and being bandits, said H.O. When did you try that? Asked Dora quickly. You know I told you it was wrong. It wasn't wrong the way we did it, said Alice, quicker still, before Oswald could say, who asked you to tell us anything about it, which would have been rude, and he's glad he didn't. We only caught Albert next door. Oh, Albert next door, said Dora contemptuously, and I felt more comfortable, for even after I didn't say who asked you, etc., I was afraid Dora was going to come the good elder sister over us. She does that a jolly sight too often. Sorry, just taking my slippers off because my feet are getting hot. Dickie looked up from the paper he was reading and said, This sounds likely, and he read out, L100 secures partnership in lucrative business for sale of useful patent. L200 10 weekly. L. Actually, it's not an L, it's a pound symbol, which looks like a cursive capital letter L with a horizontal line across the main stroke. So it goes like this, and then it has a line across it. £100 secures partnership in lucrative business for sale of useful patent. £10 weekly. No personal attendance necessary. Jobbins, 300 Old Street Road. I think this is the early days of scams. I wish we could secure that partnership, said Oswald. He was 12 and a very thoughtful boy for his age. Alice looked up from her painting. She was trying to paint a fairy queen's frock with green bice, and it wouldn't rub. I'm not sure what bice is. B-I-C-E. One of you can look that up. And if we don't get time here, you can write it over in the Discord server so I know what it is. It will never rub off, no matter how expensive your paint box is, and even boiling water is very little use. Oh, sorry. Green bice must be a colour in the watercolour paint box, because the paints used to be little rectangular pieces of dry paint that were in a box, and you put water on them and rubbed the brush on them, and it released the colour, and then you could use it. So she said, bother the bice. And Oswald, it's no use thinking about that. Where are we to get £100? £10 a week is £5 to us, Oswald went on. He had done the sum in his head while Alice was talking. Because partnership means halves, it would be A1. Noel sat sucking his pencil. He'd been writing poetry as usual. I saw the first 2 lines. I wonder why green bice is never very nice. Suddenly he said, I wish a fairy would come down the chimney and drop a jewel on the table, a jewel worth just £100. She might as well give you the £100 while she's about it, said Dora. Or while she was about it, she might as well give us £5 a week, said Alice. Or 50, said I. Medium to bright yellow-green colour. There you go. You ask and you find out. That's green bice. Or 50, said I. Or 500, said Dickie. I saw H.O. open his mouth, and I knew he was going to say or 5,000. So I said, well, she won't give us 5p, but if you'd only do as I'm always saying and rescue a wealthy old gentleman from deadly peril, he would give us a pot of money, and we could have the partnership and £5 a week. £5 a week would buy a great many things. Then Dickie said, why shouldn't we borrow it? So we said, who from? And then he read this out of the paper. Money privately without fees. The Bond Street Bank. Manager Z. Rosenbaum. Advances cash from £20 to £10,000 on ladies' or gentlemen's note of hand alone without security. No fees, no inquiries, absolute privacy guaranteed. What does it all mean? Asked H.O. It means that there is a kind gentleman who has a lot of money and he doesn't know enough poor people to help, so he puts it in the paper that he will help them by lending them his money. That's it, isn't it, Dickie? Dora explained this and Dickie said yes, and H.O. said he was a generous benefactor like in Miss Edgeworth. Then Noel wanted to know what a note of hand was, and Dickie knew that because he'd read it in a book, and it was just a letter saying you will pay the money when you can, and signed with your name. No inquiries, said Alice. Oh, Dickie, do you think he would? Yes, I think so, said Dickie. I wonder Father doesn't go to this kind gentleman. I've seen his name before on a circular in Father's study. Perhaps he has, said Dora, but the rest of us were sure he hadn't, because of course if he had, there would have been more money to buy nice things. Just then Pincher jumped up and knocked over the painting water. He is a very careless dog. I wonder why painting water is always such an ugly colour. Dora ran for a duster to wipe it up, and H.O. dropped drops of the water on his hands and said he'd got the plague. It's because of the marks from the different colour. So we played at the plague for a bit, and I was an Arab physician with a bath towel turban and cured the plague with magic acid drops. Acid drops being a type of sweet, which are just rather tart, lemony flavoured, hard-boiled lollies. After that it was time for dinner, and after dinner we talked it all over and settled that we would go and see the generous benefactor the very next day. But we thought perhaps the GB, it is short for generous benefactor, would not like it if there were so many of us. I have often noticed that it is the worst of our being 6. People think 6 a great many when it's children. That sentence looks wrong somehow. I don't mean they don't mind 6 pairs of boots or 6 pounds of apples or 6 oranges, especially in equations, but they seem to think you ought not to have 5 brothers and sisters. Of course, Dickie was to go because it was his idea. Dora had to go to Blackheath to see an old lady, a friend of father's, so she couldn't go. Alice said she ought to go because it said ladies and gentlemen, and perhaps the GB wouldn't let us have the money unless there were both kinds of us. H.O. said Alice wasn't a lady, and she said he wasn't going anyway. Then he called her a disagreeable cat, and she began to cry. But Oswald always tries to make up quarrels, so he said, "You're little sillies, both of you." And Dora said, "Don't cry, Alice, he only meant you weren't a grown-up lady." Then H.O. said, "What else did you think I meant? Disagreeable?" So Dickie said, "Don't be disagreeable yourself, H.O. Let her alone and say you're sorry, or I'll jolly well make you." So H.O. said he was sorry. Then Alice kissed him and said she was sorry too, and after that H.O. gave her a hug and said, "Now I am really and truly sorry." So it was all right. Noel went the last time any of us went to London, so he was out of it, and Dora said she would take him to Blackheath if we'd take H.O. So as there's been a little disagreeableness, we thought it was better to take him, and we did. At first we thought we'd tear our oldest things a bit more and put some patches of different colours on them to show the GB how much we wanted money. But Dora said that would be a sort of cheating, pretending we were poorer than we are. And Dora is right sometimes, though she is our elder sister. Then we thought we'd better wear our best things so that the GB might see we weren't so very poor that he couldn't trust us to pay his money back when we had it. But Dora said that would be wrong too, so it came to our being quite honest, as Dora said, and going just as we were, without even washing our faces and hands. But when I looked at H.O. in the train, I wished we had not been quite so particularly honest. Everyone who reads this knows what it is like to go in the train, so I shall not tell about it, though it was rather fun, especially the part where the guard came for tickets at Waterloo, and H.O. was under the seat and pretended to be a dog without a ticket. We went to Charing Cross, and we went round to Whitehall, and we just went round to Whitehall to see the soldiers, and then by St. James for the same reason, and when we'd looked in at the shops a bit, we got to Brook Street, Bond Street. It was a brass plate on a door next to a shop. Okay, so Bond Street is a main shopping area in central London, and Brook Street is a street that's off the area around Bond Street. So the area is why he's referring to Bond Street. It was a brass plate on a door next to a shop, a very grand place where they sold bonnets and hats, all very bright and smart, and no tickets on them to tell you the price. We rang a bell, and a boy opened the door, and we asked for Mr. Rosenbaum. The boy was not polite. He did not ask us in, so then Dickie gave him his visiting card. It was one of father's, really, but the name is the same, Mr. Richard Bastable, and we others wrote our names underneath. I happened to have a piece of pink chalk in my pocket, and we wrote them with that. Then the boy shut the door in our faces, and we waited on the step, but presently he came down and asked our business, so Dickie said, "Money advanced, young shaver, and don't be all day about it." And then he made us wait again till I was quite stiff in the legs, but Alice liked it because of looking at the hats and bonnets, and at last the boy opened, and the door said, "Mr. Rosenbaum will see you." So we wiped our feet on the mat, which said so, and we went upstairs with soft carpets and into a room. It was a beautiful room. I wished then we had put on our best things, or at least washed a little, but it was too late now. The room had velvet curtains and a soft, soft carpet. It was full of the most splendid things, black and gold cabinets, and china, and statues, and pictures. There was a picture of a cabbage, and a pheasant, and a dead hare, that was just like life, and I would have given worlds to have it for my own. The fur was so natural, I should never have been tired of looking at it. A particular era of painting was lifelike still lifes, which is where you have a selection of things posed and then they've been painted. Like we would take a photograph of them now. And some of them were incredibly lifelike, but they had some rather odd things in some of the paintings like that. I should never have been tired of looking at it, but Alice liked the one of the girl with the broken jug best. And then besides the pictures there were clocks and candlesticks and vases and gilt-looking glasses and boxes of cigars and scent and things littered all over the chairs and tables. It was a wonderful place, and in the middle of all the splendour was a little old gentleman with a very long black coat and a very long white beard and a hooky nose like a falcon, and he put on a pair of gold spectacles and looked at us as if he knew exactly how much our clothes were worth. And then while we elder ones were thinking how to begin, for we had all said good morning as we came in, of course H.O. began before we could stop him, and he said, "Are you the G.B.?" "The what?" asked the little old gentleman. "The G.B., said H.O., and I winked at him to shut up, but he didn't see me, and the G.B. did. He waved his hand at me to shut up, so I had to. And H.O. went on, "It stands for Generous Benefactor." The old man frowned. Then he said, "Your father sent you here, I suppose?" "No, he didn't," said Dicky. "Why did you think so?" The old gentleman held out the card, and I explained that we took it because father's name happens to be the same as Dicky's. "Doesn't he know you've come?" "No," said Alice. "We shan't tell him till we've got the partnership, because his own business worries him a good deal, and we don't want to bother him with ours till it's settled, and then we shall give him half of our share." The old gentleman took off his spectacles and rumpled his hair with his hands, and then he said, "Then what did you come for?" "We saw your advertisement," Dicky said, "and we wanted £100 on our note of hand, and my sister came so that there should be both kinds of us, and we wanted to buy a partnership in the lucrative business for sale of useful patent. No personal attendance necessary." "I don't think I quite follow you," said the G.B., "but one thing I should like settled before entering more fully into the matter. Why did you call me Generous Benefactor?" "Well, you see," said Alice, smiling at him to show she wasn't frightened, though I know really she was, awfully, "we thought it was so very kind of you to try to help out poor people who want money, and to help them and lend them your money." Said the G.B. "Sit down." He cleared the clocks and vases and candlesticks off some of the chairs, and we sat down. The chairs were velvety with gilt legs. It was like a king's palace. "Now," he said, "you ought to be at school instead of thinking about money. Why aren't you?" We told him that we should go to school again when father could manage it, but meantime we wanted to do something to restore the fallen fortunes of the House of Bastable, and we said we thought the lucrative patent would be a very good thing. He asked a lot of questions, and we told him everything we didn't think father would mind our telling, and at last he said, "You wish to borrow money. When will you repay it?" "As soon as we've got it, of course," Dicky said. Then the G.B. said to Oswald, "You seem the eldest," but I explained to him that it was Dicky's idea, so my being the eldest didn't matter. Then he said to Dicky, "You are a miner, I presume?" Dicky said he wasn't yet, but he thought of being a mining engineer some day and going to Klondike. "Minor, not minor," said the G.B. "I mean, you're not of age." "I shall be in 10 years, though," said Dicky. "Then you might repudiate the loan," said the G.B. "Then you might repudiate the loan," said the G.B., and Dicky said, "What?" Of course he ought to have said, "I beg your pardon. I didn't quite catch what you said." That is what Oswald would have said. It is more polite than "what." "Repudiate the loan," the G.B. repeated. "I mean, you might say you would not pay me back the money, and the law could not compel you to do so." "Oh, well, if you think we're such sneaks," said Dicky, and he got up off his chair, but the G.B. said, sit down, I was only joking." Then he talked some more, and at last he said, "I don't advise you to enter into that partnership. It's a swindle. Many advertisements are, and I have not £100 by me today to lend you, but I will lend you £1, and you can spend it as you like, and when you are 21, you shall pay me back." "I shall pay you back long before that," said Dicky. "Thanks awfully. And what about the note of hand?" "Oh," said the G.B., "I'll trust to your honour, Between gentlemen, you know, and ladies." He made a beautiful bow to Alice. "A word is as good as a bond." Then he took out a sovereign and held it in his hand while he talked to us. He gave us a lot of good advice about not going into business too young, and about doing our lessons, just swatting a bit, on our own hook, so as not to be put in a low form when we went back to school. That's a good point, actually, because they're not in school. They're getting behind if they're not careful. Sorry. And all the time he was stroking the sovereign and looking at it as if he thought it very beautiful. And so it was, for it was a new one. Then at last he held it out to Dicky, and when Dicky put out his hand for it, the GB suddenly put the sovereign back in his pocket. "No," he said, "I won't give you the sovereign. I'll give you 15 shillings and this nice bottle of scent. It's worth far more than the 5 shillings I'm charging you for it. And when you can, you shall pay me back the pound and 60% interest. 60%. 60%. "What's that?" said H.O. "The GB said he'd tell us that when we paid back the sovereign, but the 60% was nothing to be afraid of." He gave Dicky the money, and the boy was made to call a cab, and the GB put us in and shook hands with us all and asked Alice to give him a kiss, so she did. And H.O. would do it too, though his face was dirtier than ever. The GB paid the cabman and told him what station to go to, so we went home. That evening Father had a letter by the 7 o'clock post, and when he read it he came up into the nursery. He did not look quite so unhappy as usual, but he looked grave. "You've been to Mr. Rosenbaum's," he said, and so we told him all about it. It took a long time, and Father sat in the armchair. It was jolly. He doesn't often come and talk to us now. He has to spend all his time thinking about his business, and when we'd told him all about it, he said, "You haven't done any harm this time, children. Rather good than harm, indeed. Mr. Rosenbaum has written me a very kind letter." "Is he a friend of yours, Father?" Oswald asked. "He's an acquaintance," said my father, frowning a little. "We have done some business together, and this letter—" He stopped and then said, "No, you didn't do any harm today, but I want you for the future not to do anything so serious as to try to buy a partnership without consulting me. That's all. I don't want to interfere with your plays and pleasures, but you will consult me about business matters, won't you?" Of course we said we should be delighted, but then Alice, who was sitting on his knee, said, "We didn't like to bother you." Father said, "I haven't much time to be with you, for my business takes most of my time. It is an anxious business, but I can't bear to think of you being left all alone like this." He looked so sad. We all said we liked being alone, and then he looked sadder than ever. Then Alice said, "We don't mean that exactly, Father. It is rather lonely sometimes since Mother died." Then we were all quiet a little while. Father stayed with us till we went to bed, and when he said good night, he looked quite cheerful. So we told him so, and he said, "Well, the fact is that letter took a weight off my mind." I can't think what he meant, but I am sure the GB would be pleased if he could know that he had taken a weight off somebody's mind. He is that sort of man, I think. We gave the cent to Dora. It is not quite such a good cent as we thought it would be, but we had 15 shillings, and they were all good. So was the GB. And until those 15 shillings were spent, we felt almost as jolly as though our fortunes had been properly restored. You do not notice your general fortune so much, as long as you have money in your pocket. This is why so many children with regular pocket money have never felt it their duty to seek for treasure. So perhaps our not having pocket money was a blessing in disguise, but the disguise was quite impenetrable, like the villains in the books, and it seemed still more so when the 15 shillings were all spent. Then at last the others agreed to let Oswald try his way of seeking for treasure, but they were not at all keen about it, and many a boy less firm than Oswald would have chucked the whole thing in. But Oswald knew that a hero must rely on himself alone, so he stuck to it, and presently the others saw their duty and backed him up. And that's the end of today's chapters, and I'm going to tell you the title of the next one. The next chapter is Lord Tottenham. What are they going to do? They have done some for that day and age, they've done some rather outrageous things. Goodness me. It's my pleasure. I like being able to read to people, especially if they enjoy it. So thank you for being here, everybody, and we shall see you next time, which hopefully will be on Wednesday. It's Monday today. I'm Jev. I read Monday, Wednesday and Friday from 3 till sometime after 4 o'clock, usually. The timing I'm talking about is New Zealand time, so if you're not sure when that is, find a time zone converter online and find out for yourself. If you enjoy listening to stories, follow me. If you're watching this on Twitch, if you're watching this on YouTube, then subscribe, and both systems will let you know when I either put up a new video or when I'm live online. So look forward to seeing you around next time.